Some of the tunnels are actually so small, we can't even fit into them.
It's narrowing down a bit, right? So this is the main passage, is it?
Yes, what's particularly interesting in this area is the tunnel up here is one of the ones we believe dug out by 5 or 6-year-old children.
So complete with 2 5 or 6-year-old sized hammerstones. Well, they seem to have mined it out, didn't they?
Yes, they did their job well. But you can see small pieces, like the malachite up on there, which give you an idea of how good the quality must have been if they left something like that.
It almost looks like a sort of jeweled moss, doesn't it?
Mixed in with the calcite crystals. Yeah. Those are the no value for Bronze Age miners.
4 miles of tunnels have already been revealed at Great Orme, and it's estimated that there are 30 miles waiting to be discovered. How long did it go on for?
Straight through until 500 BC.
Good grief.
Mining about 2,000 tonnes of copper.
Tons of copper? Well, how many axes would that have made?
About 10 million, roughly, depending on size.
Grief.
When you think of the population of Britain at that time, they have to be trading them out with the rest of the continent.
This is an incredible scale of production for a population that may never have exceeded 100,000. Copper has to be mixed with tin to make bronze, but the nearest tin mines are hundreds of miles away in Cornwall. Transporting metal over such distances requires a well-organised transport system today. So how on earth did they do it 4,000 years ago? Ten years ago, archaeologists in Dover came across a remarkable discovery. They found a huge wooden boat which was built nearly 2,000 years before Christ was born. This suggests that thousands of years ago, Britain had an advanced transport system.
This road was being rebuilt to join the port of Dover with the Channel Tunnel. So it was during the course of works associated with the first land link with Europe, we found the first evidence of the sea link with Europe. The timber was darkened. When we first found it, it was a very light golden brown colour, just like fresh oak. Beautiful thing. Huge logs. Trees like that just completely disappeared from Western Europe. For all its complexity, what you're really looking at here is basically 4 pieces of wood. 2 bottom planks and 2 side planks. But what they've done is taken a half log and then cleaved and hewed it down, leaving these shapes standing out of the wood, but to such tolerances they had to match up as mirror images of themselves so the whole thing can be fitted together. If they don't match up, the boat doesn't work. This is a Bronze Age boat. There is no metal whatsoever. There were no nails or anything like that.
How did they join the various planks together?
There were 2 techniques. The bottom planks along the middle there are joined by timbers hammered through those rails, you see, that were left upstanding. So that held together the bottom of the boat. The sides of the boat, what they've used here is twisted twigs of yew and literally sewed the planks together, just like you would sew 2 pieces of cloth together.
Yes. Could it go to sea?
The analysis of the hull suggests that this could travel in winds of force 4 or 5. My instinct tells me it's more likely they'll be going along the coast. About this period, flint tools disappear from the archaeological record. They imported enough bronze into this area that meant that they didn't have to use flint, which was lying all over the fields and all over the beaches. They had so much bronze they didn't need to use it, and that's a huge amount of bronze that had to be brought in. And I think it was boats like this that brought it.
The image of a Dover boat transporting goods around the coast of Britain shows a country unlike the primitive society we had once imagined. This was not a misty island of disparate tribes living in isolation, but a thriving maritime society with a network of trade routes which could also aid the spread of ideas. And ancient Britain was a country with some intriguing ideas.
Here we have a little cache of stone hammers, unused, that they actually have placed as some sort of votive offerings. 4,000 years ago, they believed that copper grew. When something grows, you need to keep feeding it to keep it growing in this area. You sometimes find stashes of animal bones in nooks and crannies. They're leading a dangerous life,
They are,
so
yeah.
you need to have the gods on your side.
This has to be the largest man-made underground space anywhere in prehistoric Europe. This was mining on a vast scale. Was this a Bronze Age gold rush? No, there was something else which gave these people the confidence to drive great shafts into the underworld. Many of the tools and implements made here were made as offerings. The mine itself is not just a place of work. And many of the corridors and passages here have offerings in them. There's a great deal of evidence beginning to accumulate that people in the Bronze Age believed in a supernatural world below the ground. To the people who sailed the Dover boat, this was more than just a timber vessel. It had a higher, more mystical power. At some point during its life, something very strange was done to it.
Deliberately abandoned, deliberately dismantled, but dismantled in such a way that isn't easy to understand. Very specific actions took place with the boat that defy a logical explanation. I'm more and more inclined to believe that something very special is happening when this boat is abandoned. I wonder if the place itself was somehow special, because this was abandoned in this very dramatic place on the boundaries between sea and land.
When the Romans invaded in the year 43, they discovered a religion that was thousands of years old. It's often believed that the Romans were not interested in the pagan rites of the ancient Britons. But writing in his book on the Gallic Wars, Julius Caesar is clearly fascinated by a group of politically active priests known as the Druids. Caesar is convinced that this group had its origins in Britain.
The Druids are engaged in things sacred, conduct public and private sacrifices, and interpret all matters of religion. One of their leading tenets is that souls do not become extinct, but pass after death from one body to another. Thus men are excited to valor, the fear of death being disregarded.
The British Museum contains a strange relic from the period in which Caesar is writing. A body found in a peat bog in Cheshire.
He was done to death in a terrible way. He was, first of all, struck on the head with an arrow-bladed axe. That apparently didn't kill him because the edges of the wound were swollen, so that he survived a little bit. He was then garroted, and they inserted a stick at the back of the neck and twisted it round, and then they jerked it so that his spine was broken, and that killed him. They carried on and cut through the jugular vein and bled him. Also, apart from an armband, which is made of fox fur, he is completely naked. The elaborate killing of a naked man, I think it's got to be ritual.
One thinks of the Druids. I mean, do you think we're looking at this sort of thing?
The Druids, of course, are associated with human sacrifice. The other link with the Druids is that in the stomach there were also some mistletoe pollen. Well, no, mistletoe means Druids.
The Druids were something that Roman historians and commentators have been flagging up for decades and decades. They were the arch enemy, the Taliban of the ancient world. They're an elite priesthood. They control law and order. And it's they who lie behind the tribal resistance to the Roman invasion.
The Romans took measures to destroy Druidism, ostensibly because they disapproved of the Druids' involvement in human sacrifice. But the Romans were being rather hypocritical. The Romans themselves slaughtered people for fun in the arena. So I don't think really it was on moral grounds they were suppressing Druids. I think the real reason was political. The Druids were an alternative political structure.
After the conquest, British resistance was pushed further and further west, high into the mountains of Wales. By AD 60, the Druids had retreated across the Menai Straits over there to Anglesey. Now, the Romans had good reason to fear the Druids, who could inspire fanatical loyalty in their followers. There's a standoff at the Menai Straits. The Romans come face to face with the Druid forces across the water. The Roman author Tacitus described the scene.
On the opposite shore stood the Britons, close embodied and prepared for action. Women were seen running through the ranks in wild disorder, their apparel funereal, their hair loose to the wind. In their hands flaming torches, and their whole appearance the frantic rage of the Furies.
It is the embodiment of terror. The Romans stand frozen, looking across the Menai Straits, absolutely petrified. And Gaius Suetonius Paullinus, the Roman governor, galvanizes them because he knows that if he can get them to invade Anglesey and beat them, he will be a hero.
Yeah.
And this is going to be one of the most brilliant events because Britain will be secured. This Druid resistance, this Druid influence, which has spread not only just across Britain, but well into Gaul, will be ended once and forever.
The shouts of their general gave the troops renewed vigour. They rushed onto the attack with impetuous fury. The island fell. The religious groves, dedicated to superstition and barbarous rites, were levelled to the ground. The Britons perished in their own flames.
But of course the Roman governor has made a huge political blunder because something else is going on behind him a few miles away.
What the Roman generals had neglected in their eagerness to destroy the Druids was the revolt of Boudicca. The furious warrior queen amassed an army and sacked the towns of Colchester and London.
This is the most terrible event in Roman Britain's history. And so the whole of southeastern Britain goes up in flames, while Suetonius Paullinus, with most of the Roman army, is fighting a war in northwest Wales, a difficult place to get back from quickly today, let alone in the year 60.
Why did the Romans risk such a humiliating defeat in the south in order to suppress a bunch of strange priests in Wales? What powers did this religion hold? This is Seahenge, the remains of a circle of 55 wooden posts surrounding the trunk of an enormous oak tree cut down over 4,000 years ago. It was some distance inland when it was made. The huge tree trunk at the centre of this extraordinary shrine was turned completely upside down before it was placed into the ground. I am certain that the people who did this believed in another world, another dimension beneath the ground. When the Romans invaded, Britain was no barbaric outpost, but a fertile, industrious nation, separated from the rest of Europe, which flourished in a unique and spectacular way. But the Romans also discovered something else.